Once you start creating your own programs and samples, you're going to want to start saving them to disk. Let's take a moment and talk about memory. There are two kinds of RAM memory in the 2600, sample RAM and PRAM. Sample RAM is used only for actual sample data, whether it's samples you make yourself or that you load from disk. If you have the sampling version of the 2600, your unit comes with 4 meg of sample RAM. If you have the basic unit, you have no sample RAM. Either way, you can expand your unit up to 128 meg using SIMs. This type of memory is volatile. That is, when you turn the unit off, the samples will be lost, making it necessary to save them to disk before turning the unit off. The other type of RAM, PRAM, is used to hold all objects except for the actual samples. This type of RAM is battery-backed. However, it is always a good idea to back up your data by saving it to disk anyway. Press the Disk Mode button. The current disk parameter is highlighted. If you have not changed this from the factory default, it will be set at floppy. You can use this parameter to select either the floppy drive or a SCSI drive. Each device in a SCSI chain needs to have its own separate ID. There are 8 possible IDs, numbered between 0 and 7. The default number for the 2600 is 6. If you're planning on hooking your 2600 up to a SCSI drive, we recommend that you read the SCSI information in the manual. SCSI has several rules that need to be followed, or you can end up with corrupt data. For now, we'll be working with the floppy drive, so set the current drive to floppy. Take a double density or high density disk and put it in the drive. Make sure the Write Protect tab is in the down position. The K2600 uses a DOS format for its floppy disks. If you have a disk pre-formatted for DOS, you can save to it without formatting. Otherwise, you must format the disk. Press one of the More buttons till you see Format and press it. Answer yes, and you will be asked whether to format to a 720K or 1.4 meg. Double density disks are 720K and high density disks are 1.4 meg. You should always format the disk for the appropriate size. If you try and format a double density disk for 1.4, it will fail the formatting process. Press yes on the next couple of screens and the formatting process starts. For those of you working with a SCSI drive, the process is basically the same. However, you will not be given the choice of size to format the drive. The 2600 will format it for the appropriate size. There are a couple of things to know about formatting SCSI. If you are using an optical drive, make sure to use a cartridge that is formatted for 512 bytes per sector instead of 1024 bytes per sector. The second thing is that the 2600 does not format SCSI devices in fully implemented DOS, as it does with floppy disks. However, the 2600 can read and write to DOS-formatted SCSI drives. So those of you with a computer may want to format the drive for the computer. Then you can hook up the drive to either the PC or the 2600. The 2600 has a limit of 2 gigs for the drive size. If you have a larger drive and format it from the 2600, it will be formatted for 2 gig. If you format your drive from the PC, make sure to make the first partition 2 gig or less, since the K2600 only sees the first partition. The other partitions can still be used by the PC. Next, we'll talk about directories. You can group files on disk together within a directory, also known as a folder to Macintosh users. Grouping files by directory is extremely useful for organizing your sounds and songs, especially if you have a large hard drive. You can even put directories within other directories, just like on a computer. This is known as hierarchical file system. Press the Write More button and select New Directory. You are then asked to name the directory. The name can be up to 8 characters and follows DOS naming standards. This screen looks similar to the naming screen for objects, but 2 of the soft buttons are different. The 2 arrow buttons are replaced. You can still move the cursor by using the left and right arrow buttons to the right of the display. The End soft button moves the cursor to the last character. The Choose button will display a list of names of files already on the disk. This can be useful if you're naming a series of directories with similar names. You can pull the name off the disk without having to retype it. and then modify it. We'll name our directory Video. Next, the 2600 will ask you if you want to use the current directory for the file. Since this is our first directory, just press OK. The 2600 creates a directory and returns you to disk mode. Now we're ready to save a file. For all disk operations, there are two methods you can use. One is the bank method, and the other is the object method. The object method will allow you to save and load individual objects. We'll start with the bank method, since it's simpler. Press the right More button and select Save. Notice there are different banks of 100. If you scroll down, you will also see Everything, which saves everything in RAM, and Master, which saves all the global and MIDI parameters. When you choose a bank to save, it will save all types of objects in that bank. An asterisk after the bank indicates that there are objects in that bank. Let's look at the soft buttons on this page. Pressing Export gives you the opportunity to save a file in other formats besides the Kurzweil format. AIFF and WAV are two different sample formats. MIDI stands for a standard MIDI file, which is a standard format for sequences. Once you have selected your format, the K2600 will display any objects that would apply to that format. Since we have neither samples or songs in memory at this point, the display shows nothing. Press Cancel, then Save again. The Object Soft button allows you to use the object method of saving. We'll be showing this method later. The New Directory soft button performs the same feature found on the Disk Mode page. It is also placed here so you can create a new directory to save a file without having to exit the Save page. We'll save the 200s bank, since that is where we saved the program we created. Once 200 through 299 is highlighted, press OK. Once again, we see the naming page. We'll name our file Dream and press OK to save it. Next, the 2600 asks which directory we wish to save in and shows the current directory. In this case, it's the root directory, which is the top level of the disk hierarchy. This is indicated by the backslash with no other directory names. We want to save the file in our video directory, so press Change. The top line of the display shows that we are in the root directory. The display shows all directories and files found within the current level. In this case, there's only one directory. The three soft buttons on the left side will help you navigate through the directories. Since you can have directories placed within other directories, these buttons allow you to move up and down through the hierarchy. The root button takes you immediately to the top level. The parent button moves you back up one level, and the open button shows you the directories within the current directory. Pressing Current will save the file to the current root level directory. If you want to save the file within the video directory, press Set Directory button. The file is then saved. Now, let's load a file into the 2600. For this example, we'll load a file from one of the disks that came with your 2600. This disk is marked Demos. Put the disk in the drive and press Load. The 2600 looks at the disk and will display all the files and directories in the root level directory. You want to take some time exploring the files on this disk. There's a directory full of demo sequence files. Scroll down until you see the file marked Video. This time we'll use the object method to load individual objects. Press Open. The 2600 reads the file and will display all the objects in the file. You can select individual objects to load. Simply scroll till that object is highlighted and press Select. an asterisk will appear next to the name indicating it's been selected. You can scroll through all the objects and select as many as you want this way. Once you've selected objects, you may want to double-check the items you have selected. Pressing the Next soft button will jump you to the next selected item in the list. If you have different types of objects in the file, pressing the Type soft button will jump you to the first object for each type in the list. Another way to select objects is by using the Multi-soft button. Pressing this button gives you a new screen which will allow you to select objects by various criteria. If the Select parameter is set to Type Range, you can select various types of objects within a selected range of IDs. For example, you could choose to load only programs with IDs between 200 and 250. The All, Type, and Toggle and Clear soft buttons will help you in quickly selecting or deselecting groups of objects. There are also other settings for the Select parameter. Check your manual for a detailed description of these features. Once you have chosen the objects you wish to be selected, press the Set soft button. You will be returned to the Object Load page, and you'll see that the objects you choose now have an asterisk, indicating that they have been selected. Now, press OK. You'll then be asked which bank you want to load the objects into. Let's pick the 200 bank. Next, a group of soft buttons appear which allow you to pick the method the 2600 will use to load the objects. If you started with an empty bank, you'll see only Append and Fill. Since we started with a bank that already contained objects, we also see Overfill, Overwrite, and Merge. Each of these methods will load in the objects to different locations depending on what is in the file and what is already in that bank. For a complete description of the differences between the various choices, consult your manual. For now, we'll choose Append. The 2600 loads the objects and returns to disk mode. If you go to Program mode and scroll through the bank, you'll see the objects you chose. Disk mode also gives you other tools for manipulating files and directories. You can delete or rename them. You can move them from within one directory to another. You can also copy individual files or backup directories from one disk to another. These features work in much the same manner as loading and saving, so you can consult the manual if you have any further questions on that. You will also find a soft button marked Utilities. In this window, you can check the amount of free space on your current disk, list the files in various directories, or find a file or directory by using a search string. Another feature of disk mode is the ability to create macros. Macros allow you to automate loading multiple files. Once you create the macro, you simply load the macro, and it will go and load the various files that you have specified. You can even create a boot macro which will load automatically each time you turn the instrument on. For details on these features, you should check out your manual.